What's up guys, how you all doing? Cosmic Carry here. Today I'm going to be showcasing gameplay in my Caravan Tier 10 Swedish heavy auto-loading tank. Commentary is not going to be specifically about the tank and what's going up on screen. It's just kind of like the background. But I wanted to specifically talk about the reduction in the number of games that you need in order to make your way to tier 10, and also specifically about a post that I put up on the forums, which of course didn't receive hardly any views or comments, etc, etc, because basically up on the forums it's all bollocks. The stuff that they talk about, it's 90% of the posts are to do with what's the teams were terrible today. Is mentor a good thing or a bad thing? And it's always the same bollocks on there. But I do put up pretty decent posts up on there from time to time. I don't know why. I don't know why I should bother, but it at the same time, I am kind of proud of some of the posts that I have put up, because they're really decent. They're well thought out posts. They're well constructed. I know how to use my paragraphs and spell check and all of this jazz, and they do kind of showcase my state of mind at the time, of playing at that specific time of playing World of Tanks. Because I've put up some really decent posts in 5 years of playing World of Tanks. I put up some really crappy ones as well, but it reads basically as follows. Keep in mind, this is just my opinion. You don't have to read it. You have the right to disagree, and yes, it is a long read. Sorry. The majority of the player base has been intentionally allowed to be dumbed down to allow players to enjoy the game more. Their enjoyment factor has been placed as more important than the educational factor. This was first evident with the war stories and the tidal wave release of premium tanks, where they were trying to attract a more pick up and play or weekend warrior type player. In brackets, I shake my head when wargaming use the term rare tank, because on console this simply does not exist anymore. In my opinion, they were getting sick of us oldies, or just plain couldn't give a hoot about us, and wanted to attract a player who would play World of Tanks equally with his other console games every week. There's nothing wrong with this, This type of player would be more inclined to spend more money than us boring oldies and farts. This year they have revved up the attract casual players campaign even more with the current ops by reducing the number of games needed to move up to the next tier / move up the tech tree significantly. If I go by my games played in tiers in my first year or two and compare to today, we see a significant drop in number of battles needed to move up the tech tree. So I took a look at my tech tree grind in 2014 and 15. Specifically, I was looking at tier 8 and tier 9. So my Pershing, I needed 96 battles to move up to tier 9. In my T32, I needed, I think it was 130 games, but I rounded that up to 110 games because I kept the Pershing, the T32, and I continued playing it. So 110 seemed like a more sensible number to move up to tier 9. At tier 9, I needed 140 games in my M46 Baton to get the M48. I needed 141 in my M103 to get the E5, and 139 games in my Lorraine to get the pardon me, the Batchat 25T. So you can see, it's around 140, and tier 8 was 100 games, around there. To move up from tier 8 to tier 9, and then from tier 9 to tier 10. This is the best data I could use for my grinds back then. There are other grinds that I did, but they're tainted by myself using free XP. For instance, when I did the Death Star grind, I used a lot of free XP because I knew a lot of the tanks were crap. And E100 was my very first grind, and I continued playing the tanks even after I had unlocked the next tank in the next tier, so I couldn't go by that data either. So, but this data, the Pershing T32 and M46, M103, this is good data basically. So, anyhow, tier 8 around 100 games, tier 9 around 140 games. 2014 to 2015. So if you look at the tech tree grinds this year and last year, at tier 8, Emil 1, 45 games, Charioteer, 48 games, 65T, 63 games, 50/156 games. If you look at tier 9, Emil 2, 78 games. Conway, 67 games. Tortoise, I had to regrind the Tortoise in order to get the Badger, 74. Object 705, 56 games. That's unbelievable. SD1, 66 games. You know, these. I'm kind of looking at these numbers again. It's unbelievable. And reckless, in my personal and humble opinion, how little battles you need to move up the tech tree. Because, but anyway, I'll continue reading. We'll ramble at the end. As we can see, there seems to be an approximate 50% drop in the number of battles needed, 50%, to progress up the tech tree when comparing to 3-4 years ago. This, of course, is down to the ops and the XP boosts earned from the ops. I myself have earned 7 tier 10s in the last month or so. This is 100% true. These have been earned using no cash, no free XP, just by taking advantage of the many XP multipliers wisely. So the positives for this new system, is you get your tier 10s quicker. And you do play the game more. I play it more often. I want to get my times 2s. I want to play those ops, get those rewards for the ops, etc., etc. And I do enjoy the game more. But I have noticed me becoming a bit of a crappier player, a bit of a dumber player. So yeah, and that's under the negatives. The negatives of this new system. This I first noticed about 6 months ago when the ops started to significantly reduce the number of games needed to move up the tiers. I noticed this about this time last year, something like that. I was about to start playing the SD1 and was seriously looking forward to playing it. I was a huge fan of the E75 and a lot of people had compared the two. So I was basically expecting to play the E75 all over again. I love my E75. My E75 was legendary. I just love that thing. I have so many fond memories of playing it in the E75. It's a 100% a keeper. I kind of consider it like, one of my go-to tanks. I haven't played it in a while, but back in the day it was one of my go-to tanks. I'll never ever sell the thing. It's a bouncing machine. It's provided me tons of videos for YouTube, and so much enjoyment and all that jazz. So I was expecting to have the E75 level of enjoyment when I got the SD1. Unfortunately for me, the number of games needed to grind was only 66. So no sooner had I upgraded the thing, there was literally just 20 odd games needed to get to the tier 10. I feel like my SD1 grind was a completely wasted opportunity due to having had not enough games to appreciate the thing. I knew I had a gem on my hands, but even before I started to understand / enjoy the tank, I was given the opportunity to move up. My SD1 stats also reflect this. In other words, they suck. And I completely understand that you can continue playing in the tank don't have to get rid of the tank. And you know, I plan to rebuy the SD1 one day, but we're not talking about that. You know, we're talking about how quick it takes to grind now compared to 2-3 years ago. You know, that's what we're discussing, and that what effect that has on the player base. Yeah. This happened again recently with the Object 705 Tier 9 Heavy. I hated this tank initially stock, but once it was upgraded I began to see the light. Again, soon after that my time was done in the thing. Only 56 games were needed. Stats suck for this tank too. When I originally did the E75 grind and many other tier 9s and 8s, I would be forced to understand the tank by watching vids, reading guides, talking to others, etc. It was mandatory and was more to make the grind more enjoyable. Otherwise I would hate the tank. This would force me to play the tank as best as I could, and the team got the best out of me and my tank. I became a better tanker. Every tank in the line would be preparing, teaching and training you for the tier 10. So by the time you hit tier 10, you were as ready as you could be. This is no longer needed because you can now complete a tier 9 grind, for instance, in a day or two, whereas before this was an epic undertaking. The result is we now have players that no longer know how to play their tanks properly due to the little amount of games needed to spend in them. Reaching tier 10 used to be a 400-500 game expedition, and now it's more like 250. Since last year I've been saying to myself there is something odd about the game now. Something has changed, something's amiss. This is true, you know. I have not really changed the number of games I play weekly, but the number of epic games I experience has dropped big time. In other words, the majority of the player base knowledge has dropped due to not enough time spent in tanks in order to appreciate and learn how to play them. The game has gone from World of Tanks to race to tier 10. How well do I play in my tanks to how fast can I get to tier 10? And that was my post basically. So I still stand by this 100%. You know, a lot of some guys in the comments on the forum said, you know, well, you don't have to get rid of the tank, like I said. But like I said earlier, you know, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the average player. The average player wants to get to tier 10 as quick as he can. And because of the speed, i.e. the speed is too quick of getting to tier 10, when they're in their SD1, when they're in their E75, they're not playing it correctly. So when you're facing the reds and you see an SD1 on your left, you see E75 on your right, you know, back in the day, you'd say, okay, those are OP machines, you know, I've got some support here. But nowadays it's kind of like you cannot rely on neither of these players, because chances are they're just idiots when it comes to using their tanks, because they have not spent enough time in their tanks. And this time next week, that guy in his SD1 has moved up. You know, that guy in his E75 has moved up a tier and gotten rid of those tanks. Whereas before, you would have to spend, on tier 9, you would have to spend weeks grinding that tank. And you'd get to know that tank. You'd be forced to figure out that tank. Because if you didn't, then, you know, I don't think your patience would run out, because you just be having crap game after crap game after crap game. But if you don't know your tank and you're having crap game after crap game, it's bearable if it's only a handful of games. If you just got to put up with sucking in a tank for 30-40 odd games to reach tier 10 each and every tier, I mean, people will put up with that, you know. So if we take a look at the, you know, the Swedish tanks, which is, you know, up on screen right now, let's have a look. I'm going to take a look at my stats real quick. The tier 6 medium 17 games it took me. You know, and I didn't use any free XP to move up. The Leo at tier 7, 39 games. The tier 8, the Emil 1, 45 games. The Emil 2, 78 games. I mean, it's just not enough games to master these tanks. I didn't get an ace mastery for none of these machines. You know, none of these machines. I don't remember any of them. None of the games were memorable. You know, you can just blast through these games and so quick. I mean, I'll go back eventually and I'll rebuy these tanks. Maybe I'll try and free mark them. Maybe I'll try and get the ace mastery. Eventually I'll do that, yes, 100%, but eventually. So, but for now, you know, they release Swedish heavies and mediums. The majority of players are just blasting through these tiers and blasting through and not knowing what they're doing, because they don't need to know what they're doing. The grind is now painless, so what the hey. Anyhow, I'm gonna shut up. Take it easy, guys. Adios, muchachos.